In a sleepy coastal town where nothing ever happened, a fisherman reeled in something that would haunt the community forever. A severed human head, wrapped in plastic, staring blankly from the depths of a blood-stained bag. What followed was a chilling descent into lies, disappearances, and a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The morning had started like any other in Ravenshollow: gray skies, salt in the air, and the distant cry of gulls circling the harbor. Claude Turner had been casting nets in these waters for nearly 40 years and swore he knew every ripple and current like the back of his weathered hands. That morning, however, something felt different. The sea was too still, the air too quiet, and when he pulled in his net, it snagged hard like it had caught on something heavy just beneath the surface. With a grunt, Claude heaved it in. What emerged from the brine wasn't the usual tangle of seaweed or lobsters. It was a black garbage bag, soaked and knotted at the top, dripping salt water. He muttered a curse and reached to untangle it, thinking some careless tourist had dumped their trash. But when he tore the plastic open with his knife, the boat seemed to freeze beneath him. Inside was a human head. A woman's. Eyes wide open. Mouth slightly parted. Hair matted and tangled, drifting in the wind like seaweed. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, and her face, though pale and swollen from the water, carried a haunting expression. Not peaceful. Not pained. Something in between. As if death had taken her by surprise. Claude didn't scream. He didn't speak. He backed away slowly, hand trembling as he reached for the radio. Within the hour, the harbor was swarming with police, forensics, and a growing crowd of locals, their morning coffee forgotten in shaking hands. Rumors moved faster than the fog. Some said it was a murder. Others whispered about old stories, the sea taking what it wanted. But everyone agreed on one thing: they had never seen anything so horrific in their lives. The medical examiner's office took the head away in a sealed container. They said very little, only that it had been cleanly severed just below the jaw. No ragged edges, no sign of animal interference. Whoever had done it knew what they were doing, and took their time. The skin was washed. The eyelids wiped. No fingerprints were found on the plastic. But inside the mouth, tucked behind the molars, they found a slip of paper, water-damaged but legible. 3 words: she shouldn't have. The investigation kicked into overdrive. Detectives from the state were brought in. The coast was combed by divers and cadaver dogs. Boats were inspected. Trash bins emptied. Nothing turned up. No torso. No limbs. Just the head. One small piece of a much larger nightmare. Ravenshollow changed overnight. People stopped walking alone. Fishermen stayed in the harbor instead of drifting out to sea. Parents wouldn't let their children near the water. It wasn't just fear, it was the kind of dread that sinks into the bones, a primal sense that something unnatural had entered their world. The sheriff, a soft-spoken man named Hal Corrigan, had lived in the town his whole life. He stood in front of the community center at a hastily called town meeting and did his best to reassure them. "We are treating this as a homicide," he said. "And we are doing everything in our power to find out who she was and who did this to her." But there was something in his eyes, the same fear everyone else was feeling. Like the ground had shifted and no one knew what was real anymore. 3 days later, the forensics lab confirmed the head belonged to a woman aged approximately 22 to 26 years old. Caucasian. No dental records matched. No fingerprints were in the system. Her features were distinctive: high cheekbones, a thin scar near her temple, and what looked like a tattoo behind one ear, though the ink had mostly faded. Still, no one came forward. No missing person reports matched her description. Flyers went up in surrounding counties. News stations picked up the story. A segment aired on late-night cable calling her the girl in the net. But the more people saw her, the more questions arose. Why had no one reported her missing? Why was there no other trace of her anywhere? And perhaps the most chilling, why did the killer leave only her head? As the town watched investigators come and go, frustration began to boil. Some accused the police of hiding information. Others believed the killer had to be someone local. No outsider would know where to dump a body without being seen. And then there were those who believed something worse, that this wasn't the first time. That the sea had kept secrets before. One woman, the widow of a former dock worker, claimed her husband once spoke of finding bones in the water back in '97. Bones he was told to throw back and keep quiet about. At the time, no one believed her. But now her story had a new, terrifying weight. Despite all the pressure, weeks passed with no breakthrough. The bag the head was found in came from a hardware store in another county, one without security cameras. The note in her mouth was written in blue ink on a generic receipt, the origin untraceable. Every lead ended in silence. But the fear didn't fade. It deepened. Because somewhere out there, the breakthrough came from a sketch. Not a fingerprint, not a database match, but a pencil drawing found in the bottom of a duffel bag at the back of a rural bus station 42 miles inland. The bag had been sitting in an unclaimed luggage room for nearly 2 weeks. A janitor cleaning out the space opened it, expecting clothes or trash. What he found instead were dozens of spiral-bound sketchbooks, pages filled with portraits, street scenes, distorted figures, and self-portraits of a young woman with intense eyes and a crescent-shaped scar near her temple. One sketch in particular showed the harbor at Ravenshollow, viewed from a high bluff, a view only locals knew. Scribbled in the corner were initials, LM. When the authorities were alerted, facial reconstruction experts compared the sketch to the recovered head. Was a match. Her name was Lila McCay. Age 24. No fixed address. A wanderer who had lived in shelters, worked temporary jobs, and documented her path through drawings. She had been in and out of Maine over the past year, moving between towns, leaving behind pieces of herself in bus terminals and cafe napkins. Social media had very little trace of her, except for a few old art posts under a forgotten Tumblr account. Her sister, Amelia, had been searching for her on and off but hadn't filed a missing person report. Lila had always gone off the grid for months at a time. When investigators finally reached Amelia, her voice cracked before she could say a word. She had known something was wrong, had felt it. The last time she heard from Lila was a voicemail, left just past midnight 2 weeks before the head was found. It was brief and frantic. "Amy, I think I messed up. He followed me. He said I shouldn't draw him. If something happens, don't come here. Please, don't come." There was no number to trace the call. Lila had used a payphone. Detectives began reconstructing her final movements. Witnesses in Ravenshollow vaguely recalled a woman matching her description. A waitress at a diner remembered her sitting alone with a coffee and sketchpad, staring out the window for hours. A local motel manager said she had checked in under the name Eliza M. She paid cash. No ID. No one remembered seeing her leave. The strangest account came from a gas station clerk just outside of town. He said Lila had come in late one night looking nervous. She bought a map, 3 cans of Red Bull, and asked if there were any abandoned places near the cliffs. He told her about the old coastwatcher's shack, a structure long forgotten and collapsing into the woods. Before leaving, she asked him one more question. "Has anyone ever told you they felt followed here? Like, someone watching from the trees?" The clerk thought she was on something. Maybe she was. Or maybe not. Inside her sketchbook were dozens of drawings that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. Repeated images of a tall, faceless man in a gray coat standing at a distance, always partially hidden, behind a tree, reflected in windows, or standing near doorways. The kind of image that, if drawn once, might be dismissed. But Lila had drawn him over and over. On every page. Sometimes surrounded by scribbled phrases. "He's real. He waits. Don't look behind you." The psychologists on the case debated whether Lila was spiraling into psychosis or documenting something more literal. One profiler believed the drawings could represent a stalker, someone she encountered and tried to avoid. Perhaps he noticed her sketching and became enraged. Perhaps she captured something she wasn't supposed to see. Then came a chilling clue. At a pawn shop 3 towns over, detectives found a camera with a cracked lens and 2 undeveloped rolls of film. The shop owner said a girl had sold them weeks earlier. The photos were processed. Most were blurry or mundane, trees, clouds, storefronts. But 3 images stood out. Taken from afar with a shaky hand, they showed a man in a gray coat standing near the edge of the bluff where Lila was last believed to be. In the final shot, he was closer, facing the camera. His face was obscured by light flare, but his posture was unmistakably deliberate, as if he knew he was being watched. The man was never identified. When Amelia viewed the sketchbooks, her hands trembled. She confirmed the scar, the drawing style, the recurring themes. Lila had always been drawn to dark things, but she also had a history of sensing danger before it arrived. She felt things, Amelia said. She called it her curse. Like she could see the wrongness in people. Whether it was intuition or paranoia, it didn't matter now. What mattered was that Lila knew something was going to happen to her. She knew someone was following her. And still, no one could find the rest of her body. The authorities doubled efforts, scouring the woods near the coastwatcher's shack. They found remnants of a small fire, a scarf matching one Lila wore in a photograph, and pages of a journal burned and shredded. The remaining fragments hinted at dread. "He's always there. Behind me. Beneath me. In the water. He doesn't blink. There was no blood. They thought the discovery of Lila's identity would bring them closer to the truth. Instead, it opened a door into something darker, something that stretched far beyond a single murder. The investigation, already hanging by threads, took a stranger turn when an elderly man from the outskirts of Ravenshollow walked into the sheriff's office holding a weathered envelope. He said it was meant for the authorities, passed down from his late brother, a retired lighthouse keeper. The note inside was dated 1993 and simply read, "Another girl vanished. Same place. Same eyes." The sheriff initially dismissed it, just a fading memory from a man long dead. But curiosity got the better of him and he began to look into the records. What he found made his skin crawl. Over the past 30 years, there had been at least 7 reported disappearances of young women within a 50-mile radius of Ravenshollow. All around the same age. All drifters or loners. All cases that went cold within weeks. Most had never even made the evening news. And then came the most chilling realization. In 4 of those cases heads had been found. One in the woods, one in a marsh, one buried in a sand dune. The bodies were never recovered. It had happened before. More than once. But every time, it had been treated as an isolated, unconnected crime. Different counties. Different jurisdictions. And always just enough time in between to forget. Lila wasn't the first. Word spread fast. Locals began whispering about legends they hadn't spoken of in decades. Stories passed down from fishermen and forest workers. About the watcher in the dunes. About shadows seen moving against the cliffs at dusk. About voices heard calling from the sea late at night. Voices that didn't belong to anyone living. Of course, none of it was in any official report. Just tales. Fragments of fear sewn into the town's history. But they took on new meaning now. Especially after the discovery near the cliffs. 2 hikers, unaware of the investigation, had stumbled upon what they thought was a collapsed animal den. It turned out to be a man-made structure. A rusted, moss-covered bunker hidden beneath a thicket of thorns. Inside were remnants of old military equipment, broken furniture, and, disturbingly, stacks of water-damaged photographs nailed to the walls. Most were too faded to identify, but a few were clear, black and white shots of young women, all seemingly unaware they were being photographed. Some of the images matched known missing persons. Others didn't. But the bunker held something worse. Behind a false wall was a crawlspace no wider than a coffin. And inside were bones, small, brittle, and arranged in almost ceremonial fashion. Not enough to form full skeletons. Just fragments. Pieces of jaw. A collarbone. And carved into the stone wall, barely visible beneath grime and soot, were 5 words. She watched, so she vanished. Forensic teams sealed off the area. The media latched onto the story like vultures. The FBI got involved. The town descended into a kind of silent hysteria. People started locking their doors during daylight. Tourists canceled trips. And the name Lila McCay became synonymous with something larger. Something unspeakable. But just as investigators began connecting the dots, the trail went cold again. They had one potential suspect. A man who had appeared in several nearby towns over the years, always under a different name. He rented short-term cabins, bought large quantities of rope, and always paid in cash. His last known location? A cottage 5 miles from the bluff where Lila was believed to have disappeared. When authorities raided the place, it was empty. Abandoned, no fingerprints, no signs of recent activity. Only a single item remained. A Polaroid photo of Lila, standing on the edge of the bluff, wind in her hair. She was smiling. And behind her, faint but unmistakable, was the blurred outline of someone standing in the trees. The man was never found. His name was never confirmed. It was as if he had melted into the very landscape. What made it worse was the final piece of evidence, one that no one could explain. A week after the story broke nationwide, a sealed envelope arrived at Amelia's doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single strip of film. When developed, it showed an underground tunnel, lit only by flashlight. In the corner of the frame, a partial glimpse of what looked like a hand, pale, motionless, and buried under wet soil. On the back of the photo, in crude handwriting, were the words, "She isn't done speaking." Amelia handed it to the authorities, but the source was never traced. The soil didn't match the cliffside or the woods. The location in the photo was unrecognizable. It was a breadcrumb, a taunt, or a promise. Eventually the headlines faded. The case moved into unsolved